Okay, so this presentation is on the life, the career, and the influence of the famous psychoanalyst Carl Gustav Jung. First, we're going to look at Jung's early life. Carl Jung was born on July 26, 1875, in Keswil, Switzerland. His paternal grandfather was the rector of Basel University and a Grand Master in the Freemasons. His maternal grandfather, however, had visions, conversed with the dead, and learned Hebrew, believing that it was the language spoken in heaven. There's some speculation that this is where Jung may have gotten his interest in mysticism and the occult. Now, Jung's mother was hospitalized multiple times for mental illness, starting when he was 3 years old. And Jung's father struggled with his religious beliefs, and Jung felt his father was kind but weak-willed. Jung is described as having a solitary childhood where he was quiet and observed those around him. Once he did go to school, he was the victim of bullying, and it's said that his reactions to this bullying gave him insight into hysteria. I'm going to look at Jung's early adulthood, including his education, relationships, and career. Jung attended Basel University and graduated in 1900. He then attended the University of Zurich to obtain his MD. He wrote his thesis on his cousin, who believed herself to be a medium and also suffered from sleepwalking. And he spent 2 years observing her seances and recording that and put that into a doctoral thesis. During that time, he also worked at an asylum underneath a pioneering psychologist. Jung applied association tests to patients at this asylum, and he used their illogical or peculiar responses to stimuli to develop the concept of the complex. Jung met Emma Rauschenbach in 1896. She was the 14-year-old daughter of a friend of his, and they married 7 years later in 1903 when Emma was 21. Together they had 5 children, 1 boy and 4 girls. So next we'll talk about the relationship between Jung and Freud. Sometime in the early 1900s, Jung began correspondence with Freud, and they built a friendship. They met for the first time in 1907, and it went really well. Apparently, they spent 13 hours straight just talking and hanging out. Now, Freud eventually wanted Jung to become his crown prince. This could have been more of a political move because Jung came from a different country and had a different religious belief, and so it would have essentially made psychoanalysis seem more diverse and international. Now, even though their friendship went really well at first, over a 5-year period, Freud and Jung's friendship dissolved. And a lot of that is due to the fact that Jung was developing his own ideas, some of those which came in direct conflict with Freud. Freud also did not like Jung's interest in the occult and mysticism. My favorite quote from the breakdown of Freud and Jung's relationship comes from a letter that Freud wrote to Jung. Now, Jung had written Freud a letter about something he was really interested in that had to do with the mysticism or the occult, and Freud was just not having it. And he responded to Jung by saying, "I look forward to hearing more about your investigations of the spook complex. My interest being the interest one has in a lovely delusion, which one does not share oneself." Next, we're going to dive into middle adulthood, which is going to cover Jung's theories, his career, and his achievements. Looking at Jung's structure of personality, there are similarities to Freud. However, there's some big differences. The ego is the same as Freud's ego. The personal unconscious is basically the same thing as Freud's id. The collective unconscious is where we break away from Freud. It's an inherited unconscious that connects all humans, and this really influences us through basically archetypes and shared knowledge. Next, we have the shadow, which is a collection of repressed material from both the collective unconscious and personal unconscious. And essentially, the shadow is basically the opposition in the for the ego. It's what challenges us to grow. And then we have the persona, which is going to be our front-facing part of our personality. This forms our public image, and it's more heavily influenced by others and societal norms. Well, in addition to his structured personality, Jung also had attitudes and functions. Jung developed two terms for attitudes: introvert and extrovert. Introverts direct their energy inward, and extroverts direct their energy outward. Jung believed both introverts and extroverts have an unconscious desire to have the opposite orientation. Jung's concepts of functions include thinking, feeling, and sensation and intuition. And Jung's attitudes and functions have been the basis for many personality tests, including the Myers-Briggs. Jung's career and achievements. Jung did hold a lot of professorships. He was a professor at the University of Zurich and Basel. He also lectured a lot of places, including Yale. Now, he got a lot of achievements. There was the C.G. Jung Institute, which is a institute that teaches Jungian psychology. He had a bunch of awards, including honorary fellow of England's Royal Society of Medicine and an honorary member of the Swiss Academy of Medical Sciences. Jung also amassed a large volume of works, which have been published into a 20-volume collection. Explore late adulthood, which include health, UFOs, and Jung's passing. In 1944, Jung was hospitalized for a heart attack. This near-death experience had a really big impact on him. Apparently, he had a series of visions, and those really influenced him. After Jung's heart attack, he spent the rest of his life researching UFOs. His research focused on the psychology and the meaning of UFOs and not really whether they exist or not. So Jung connected them to the archetype of the mandala. Jung was really into symbols and archetypes and found connection there. And according to Jung, higher collective anxiety would cause the projection of UFO sightings, which symbolize the mandala, which is a symbol of peace and unification. And so during times of higher collective anxiety, we project that symbol because we're longing for peace and unity. Carl Jung passed away in his home on June 6, 1961. He was 85 years old. At the time, he was survived by his 5 children, 19 grandchildren, and 9 great-grandchildren. We're going to look at Jung's influence after his death in both psychology and the world beyond. Jung has had a continued influence on psychology. Currently, there are just under 4,000 certified Jungian therapists. There's multiple courses offered on Jungian therapy, multiple C.G. Jung institutes around the world. There are many aspects of Jungian therapy that are used in therapeutic practice. And there have been several books, commentaries, journals, theoretical papers that have been published on Jung's work. Jung also laid the foundation for many personality tests that are used throughout psychology today. On psychology, Jung indirectly influenced the founding of the 12-step program Alcoholics Anonymous. A former patient of Jung's mentored Bill Wilson, who's the co-founder of AA. Jungian principles are reflected strongly in the AA program, especially with the convergence of spirituality and deep investigation of the psyche. After AA's founding, Bill Wilson wrote a letter to Jung expressing how influential Jung had been.